Hello again. I have been fascinated to watch the agitprop and disinformatia which has emerged since the campaign to call to account those in official positions who ignored the grooming gangs composed almost exclusively of men of Pakistani heritage began. I mentioned this yesterday and gave a link to the campaign, and I've noticed in a number of places now there's a concerted effort to try and how can I put it, to disparage at the least, and even to assert that it's not the case that Pakistani grooming gangs were ever anything of any great significance compared with the number of other people involved in grooming children. The story being circulated by left wing sources, and even the police themselves, is that the vast majority of grooming gangs consist of white men. Believe that, and you'll believe anything. I thought, though, that it might be interesting to see how this dishonest and untruthful narrative has been constructed. In the description to this video, I give a link to the National Police Vulnerability Knowledge and Practice Programme associated with the College of Policing, for it is from this source that much of the information is taken to support this idea about white grooming gangs. Information is also collated by the Hydrant Group, which is a national policing programme which supports the work of the National Police Chiefs Council Child Protection and Abuse Investigation Working Group. I give a link to them in the description to this video. Perhaps before we look at it, we might ask ourselves what most of us mean by the expression grooming gangs. I think that the first thing we would agree on is that a gang consists of a group of people, more than just one or two, of course. We would also perhaps agree that we are talking here about adult men and not children. I dare say that all this sounds ridiculously obvious, but I have a reason for clearing ground in this way before discussing the matter further. Finally, I think that the average person thinking about the concept of a grooming gang would probably say that such groups of adult men tend to groom children who are not actually members of their families. That is to say, that they operate on a wider scale than merely abusing their own daughters and nieces. I will now ask viewers what might sound an utterly absurd question. Would they say that a grooming gang would consist of two 9-year-old boys at primary school? Is that what they mean by a grooming gang? You see, there is actually no official definition of what might constitute a grooming gang. The police talk rather of group-based child sexual abuse, and for the police a group can consist of just two people. This is their actual definition of a group, two or more people. According to the Hydrant programme, over half of all group-based child sexual abuse is carried out by other children, those under the age of 17. Around 10% of such cases are the work of children under the age of 10. In other words, when we are solemnly assured that more white people are involved in grooming gangs than those of other ethnicities, some of those supposed grooming gangs are made up of just two 8 or 9-year-old boys. We see here a very sharp disconnect between what we mean when we talk of grooming gangs and what the police mean when they are throwing sand in our eyes and trying to persuade us that white people are guilty of far more of this kind of thing than those of Pakistani heritage. They are actually talking about completely different things from the grooming gangs in places such as Rotherham and Rochdale, which were carrying out the abuse of children on an industrial scale. What else do the police include in those figures for group-based abuse of children, do you think? Well, over half of it is stuff in the family, involving parents and siblings. 95% of this abuse is by family and friends of the family. A third of it is not so-called contact abuse, but rather stuff conducted only via the internet. And so it goes on. I suggest that viewers click on the links to the police sites which I have given and have a bit of a trawl through them for themselves. It doesn't take long before you see very plainly that hardly any of those white people who are alleged to be responsible for 85% of grooming gangs actually have anything at all to do with them. As I say, when you cast your net so widely that two 9-year-olds can seriously be lumped together with an organised group consisting of 15 to 20 middle-aged men, you just know that we and the police are actually talking at cross purposes. We're not talking about the same thing. Here's a headline about what most of us think of when we talk of grooming gangs. This is from last November. Grooming gang of 20 men jailed for 219 years after sex attacks on girls as young as 12 in West Yorkshire. These were all older men and all of Pakistani heritage. All their victims were girls who were unrelated to them. As the demands grow for legal action against those who stood by and did nothing as this dreadful business took hold, we're going to hear an increasing number of claims about white people making up 85% of grooming gangs. But when you see these claims, you must always remember that over 90% of such cases are not even remotely similar to the gangs which have been operating in Bradford, Huddersfield, Oxford, Bristol and elsewhere. They are both quantitatively and qualitatively different. Let me just sum up by reminding viewers that the police idea of grooming gangs is that just two people can make a gang, and that half of the members of these gangs are children under the age of 17, and a tenth of them are under the age of 10. Remember too that 95% of such cases involve only family and friends of the family. I find it slightly disgusting that people should try and muddle things up in this way, hoping presumably to conceal the ethnicity of the perpetrators of the crimes. I imagine in the name of anti-racism, though I may be wrong about this. But I'm not deceived, nor I suspect will many of those watching this video. A concerted effort is now underway in which the police are complicit to muddy the waters and distract attention away from what has been going on. This really mustn't be allowed to happen.